Hi everyone, and welcome to today's Global IELTS Masterclass. My name is Gemma and I'm from IDP IELTS in Australia. Today we're joined by Teena, an IELTS expert with 18 years experience in IELTS, for a masterclass in IELTS speaking. If you have any comments or questions for Teena about IELTS speaking today, please leave them in the Zoom Q&A box, or if you're joining us on Facebook, please leave your comments in the comment section and we'll try and answer as many as we can today. All right, I'll hand over to you, Teena. Thank you.
Thank you, Gemma. Now, I hope you folks don't mind. I'm going to stop my video, but I'll turn it back on again during the question and answer session. But I just like it to be off so you can focus on the presentation material. So as Gemma said, my name's Teena. I'm speaking to you this afternoon from Melbourne in Australia, and we're going to be talking about the speaking module of the IELTS test. And I guess the key message I'd like to convey to you today is how important it is to practice your English every day. Learning English is a slow, long-term process. And to improve your English, you need to use English in everyday context. Speak it with your friends, write notes and emails in English, read English newspapers, listen to English radio and television, all those things that you know you need to be doing. A lot of our test takers tend to do a lot of practice tests during their preparation, which is great, or they'll take an IELTS preparation course. Now, practicing sample tests will help you learn what's expected in each part of the test. And this is, really good test preparation, but it only maximizes the English skills you have. You do need to have a sound foundation of the English language to build on. So IELTS test preparation won't necessarily improve your English language skills, but it will help you know what to expect and what to do in each step of the test. I'll talk to you tonight about how IELTS is assessed. I'll also show you how the band descriptors tell us a lot about the assessment of the speaking and writing components of the test. Looking at these descriptors should help you to understand how examiners assess your performance using the criteria scales. So as with any test, examiners are looking for particular skills. So if you have your driver's license, you know that when you went for your driving test, you had to demonstrate that you could turn right and left, do a 3-point turn, reversing, a hill start, an emergency stop. So this is similar in the IELTS speaking test. So for example, in part 1, the examiner is assessing how well you can talk about yourself. In part 2, the examiner is assessing how well you can present and deliver a short talk. And in part 3, the examiner is looking at how well you can take part in a discussion. So each component of the IELTS test has different types of questions that require particular skills to answer. So this is one of the reasons why IELTS is respected as a valid test of English proficiency. I'll also talk to you about some common mistakes that you can avoid making. And these are just mistakes of not knowing about what to expect on the test. So in this session, we'll focus on the two types of IELTS test delivered, academic or general training, which in your preparation, you'll need to decide which module is best suited for you. Most of you will have completed the academic test in the past and you'll know it well. So you might not have looked at the general training test and the differences between the two. The difference between the two modules is the reading and the writing. The listening and the speaking test is the same whether you do academic or general training. Now, the version of IELTS you take and the score you need will depend on your visa requirements. So you need to research what the requirements are of the institution at which you plan to study at, or your employer or your profession. So if your degree is in a discipline such as IT or engineering, which places more emphasis on your numerical skills than your literacy skills, you might find that the general training version is a better way to showcase your English language skills. So remember, with IELTS, you do have this unique choice if you're taking the test for migration purposes. So the difference between the two versions, as I said, lies in the reading and writing modules. They have different subject matters and different skills required for each version. All right, so let's move on to the speaking module. That's what we're going to be looking at today. But first, let me ask you, how often do you use English at home when you're chatting about things such as food, hobbies, and sport? Is it every day, 2 or 3 times a week, once a week, or rarely? So you can enter in your answers or have a think about that question, and we'll come back to it in a moment. So let's have a look at a breakdown of the speaking test. Now, one of the wonderful advantages of having an IELTS speaking test is that you have face-to-face contact with a real-life examiner, a real-life human being. You're not speaking into a computer, and this allows for real-life communication between the candidate and the examiner. As I mentioned before, examiners are listening for different language skills in each part of the test, excuse me. So in part 1, your ability to talk about yourself, so your likes and your dislikes. Now in part 1, it's very important to be able to answer the question why. So be prepared to give your reasons and give extended answers, because the examiner, particularly when talking about what you like and dislike, the examiner will ask you why. Part 2 is how well you're able to organise and present a short talk. So you'll be asked to talk about a topic for up to 2 minutes, which doesn't sound like a long time, but it actually is quite a long time. And part 3 is your ability to participate in a two-way discussion. So it's more relaxed and it's more like a conversation. Now, as you can see there on the screen, there are timings set for each part of the test because it is a standardized test. So sometimes the examiners may have to stop or interrupt candidates, and they'll do this by saying thank you. And that's the polite way of getting you to stop talking. So if the examiner has said thank you to you a couple of times, it's not because you've done anything wrong. It's just that timing dictates that the test needs to move on. So this is perfectly normal if you're interrupted by the examiner. So please don't worry. Now, for those of you who are joining us on Zoom, I think you might have had an opportunity to participate in this poll, and I'm not sure if the results are going to be shown about who responded, but how often do you use English at home? I'm hoping that most of you said every day or 2 or 3 times a week. For those who are less than that, I'd like to encourage you to be practicing every day. It's really, really important. Now, on the IELTSessentials.com website, we have the public version of the band descriptors that look like this. These are the speaking assessment criteria. And in this section, we're going to have a look at 3 different speaking tests at different levels to give you an idea of what you need to do to achieve a band 7 or higher in the test. So this is very similar to what an examiner is using when they're assessing your performance during a speaking test. So you see there are 4 columns. They represent the criteria, and there are 9 rows which represent the band score. Well, actually 10 rows, including 0. But each of those 4 columns are worth 25% of your mark. So the way examiners assess your speaking ability is by matching your performance to the band descriptors. So here is the criteria for the marking of the speaking test. And as I said, each one counts for 25% of your mark. So we've got fluency and coherence. This means how far can you maintain a flow of speech? How often do you pause? Are they long pauses? Do you hesitate much? Or do you give false starts? Now, a false start is when you start to say something and you realize you've made a mistake and you have to start again. Examiners will also be listening to how well you use connecting words and signaling words to make the relationship between your ideas clear. Lexical resource is the range and accuracy of your vocabulary. So are you able to use a wide range of words to express yourself precisely? Or do you repeat the simple words? And are you using the correct style? That's also assessed in lexical resource. Grammatical range and accuracy is the range of your grammar. Are you using a mixture of simple and complex sentences? Do you use a wide range of tenses, and do you use them accurately? And if we move on to pronunciation, examiners are listening for how well you use pronunciation to convey and enhance meaning. They'll also be listening to hear how much strain your accent may cause for the listener. Now, all of the examiners are trained to listen to all different types of accents from all over the world. So all forms of standard English are acceptable in the IELTS speaking test. But to achieve a high mark, you must show that you can use a wide range of pronunciation features such as rhythm, stress, and intonation. And make sure that you talk at an appropriate speed with a good control of individual sounds. So we're going to take a look now at 3 speaking tests. All of them received a different band score. The first one we'll look at was a band score of 6, and we'll look at the examiner comments afterwards as well. So this is Brian from China, and he's a good example of a band 6.
Now, we've been talking about a well-known person you like or admire, and I'd like to discuss with you 1 or 2 more general questions related to this. Let's consider, first of all, famous people in your country. So in China, what kind of people become famous?
Politicians, the pop stars, and, sports stars. It's similar with the other countries, I think.
Is one of those groups more popular than others?
It depends, because for politicians, you have to know them because they appeared all the time on televisions, on newspapers. But for some pop stars, because it's especially famous for the young people, because, the young people to follow the stars and the new trends. But for sports stars, they mainly become famous during, some Olympic Games or some competitions. So it really depends,
What about in the past? Were those same people famous in the past? Politicians, sports stars, and pop stars?
I think so, because even I have talked with my parents at their age, and when they was young, they also follow some pop stars and the sports stars, and for the politicians, they change quite often. So yeah, they're also famous. Yeah.
And how about the future? Where do you think it's going to go?
I think this kind of people will remain famous in the future. This type of people, because we still have lots of new pop stars, sports stars, and some new politicians. But I think some other people will join them as well. For example, nowadays some entrepreneurs. For example, the founder of the Facebook, he's famous for everyone. Even some not weird but strange people like the founder of the WikiLeaks. He's also popular because the things has done. So I think this kind of new raising group people will join, the famous people in the future.
And do you think technology is going to be the place where many of our famous people come from in the future?
Definitely, because I think, nowadays, most of people use, the Facebook, the Twitters, so definitely this kind of website or the new technology will help to, make people famous. And I think many people are working on it because, there are special companies, to make these people famous through the internet, the advertisement or the promotion. Yeah.
Now let's talk about celebrity culture. Often famous people are used in advertising. Can you give me some examples of that?
Well, it's quite often, we can see lots of famous people on the television. For example, one typical example is the Michael Jordan, because he is actually, when the first time the Nike become very famous, it's because Michael Jordan, because he is the first, he's the first NBA stars, to sign a company to, have the, serious commercials for specific companies. And I think that's a typical example, how the famous people to help the company successful, and also the company use his money to make the stars become more famous. So I think it's,
And that example you're talking about with Michael Jordan, he's a basketball player who was promoting a product that he was personally involved in producing. What about celebrities who endorse products for which they have no personal connection?
Yeah, it's quite often because people are profit oriented. Because we can see lots. I think for some like makeup production, we can see lots of female stars. They just say, okay, this one's so good, it's fantastic. Nobody know whether she's used it or not. I think sometimes it depends on This is ethnical choice. Someone they really try it and use it, and then say, okay, this one's fine, it's good. So we can rely on it. But some of them just want to get the money. So it's just do the promotion stuff without really using it or testing it.
Now, how about our young people? How might famous people or celebrities have a negative impact on our young people?
Well, as we know, some famous people is not that good. I have to say, I cannot say they're immoral, but the actions they have done is really bad. The example for the young kids or the young generation, because some of them once they become the famous, they just try to drugs, have stay in the clubs, all day, not all day, but all the night, and definitely, young people sometimes cannot distinguish good things or the bad things. Sometimes they just follow the star's actions. So it makes, some of them just, say, it's pretty cool thing, to try some drug because that star is trying it, or many stars are trying it. Or it's pretty cool, to stay with girls all the time, different girls all the time. Some my, idol, he's doing the same thing. So I think it's pretty bad negative effects on the young people.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
That's the end of the speaking test.
Thanks.
Okay, so that was watching a part 3. That was the two-way discussion between the examiner and the candidate. And let's see what the examiner's comments were about this. Now, Brian achieved a band 6 in this sample, so we can see that he's willing to give extended answers, but sometimes there's a lack of coherence because he hesitates and he also repeats himself a little bit. He also overuses certain fillers such as well, like, cause instead of because, and he says a lot as well. He does, however, use a reasonable range of linking words. So we hear some linkers such as, for example, actually, as a result. And he also uses his, and in regards to his, he also uses grammatical constructions well to introduce his ideas. So by having a hobby and by doing sports. So his fluency and coherence comes out at a band 6 there. The range of vocabulary is enough for him to be able to discuss topics at length, and he does show some ability to use less common expressions and collocation. So we hear phrases like get on very well with each other, increase money for the charity, good for the community, developed country, psychologically, physically. So he's got a good awareness of different word forms there as well. But sometimes he makes wrong word choices, even though his meaning is clear. And he does convey his ideas and opinions quite effectively. But those errors that we hear are fast speed work, relieve themselves after work, release their body pressures. But he isn't always aware of register or style, and sometimes he's a little bit informal, using words like gonna and wanna instead of going to and want to. Now, in regards to Brian's grammar, he does produce a range of structures and he uses a mix of simple and complex sentence form, but when he does try for those complex structures, his control isn't always good. So he leaves out pronouns, he leaves out articles. So they just want to get big car, big house, and that's the reason that forces them to work very hard than before. But his meaning is clear, but he's just making way too many errors to achieve higher than a band 6. Now, in terms of his pronunciation, it's generally clear, and there is some use of stress and intonation to convey meaning, but generally his intonation is flat. The rhythm is also a little mechanical. So some words are mispronounced, such as entrepreneur, and that leads to loss of clarity. So we heard whale for while, lera for leisure, and louts for lots. So he wasn't quite clear, and we weren't always able to follow him in regards to his pronunciation. So let's have a look now at a band 7, again looking at part 3 of the speaking test. And this is Alexandra, and she's Colombian, and she's a very good example of a band 7. And again, we'll go back to the examiner comments after this video.
So we've been talking about a well-known person that you like or admire, and I'd like to discuss with you one or two more general questions related to this. Let's consider first of all being in the public eye. Yeah. What are some of the advantages and disadvantages of being famous?
The advantages are that first that you will get really rich, and the fame actually helps you because you don't have to pay for a lot of stuff. They will give you free dresses and free stays in the hotels, free meals, free everything. So actually you're saving money plus the money that you're earning. And the disadvantages are that being a public eye, you lose your privacy. You will always be in the eye of the paparazzi and the people, and if someone recognizes you, they will take a picture of you, and that's the end of the relaxed evening. So I think that it will be a really big disadvantage.
Do you think if a celebrity accepts those endorsements, do you think they lose their honesty?
I don't think that they will lose their honesty, but maybe it will change them. They will have to accept the environment that they are living into right now. So if they get famous and they are not selling their soul to the devil, I don't think that they are that bad. I think that it's just human, and if they like it, well, better for them.
Can you talk about how the media reports on famous people in your country?
The reports of the media in my country, they are like having half serious news and half entertainment. So the reports are often, but not that often. They don't have like big news if Shakira gets married or not. It's like a small news, but it gets bigger with the people, not with the media, because people start to talking about the news, not the media makes it big.
Do you think more time should be spent on current events and political news?
I think so, but I think that we also need a rest from the serious stuff, and we also need entertainment. So it will be a balance, because only bad news is not good for anybody. So I think that half and half it will be better.
Why do ordinary people find the lives of celebrities so interesting?
I think because if they see somebody that successful and rich failed or getting dumped or in jail, I think that we feel better about ourselves, because we think, okay, we might not be rich, but we are better than them. So I think that's why we like it so much, to see that kind of news.
So you think most people want to see that celebrity fail?
Maybe, or maybe depends. If you don't like anybody, you will like them fail. But if you really support one person, you will like them to be like really successful.
Let's talk about celebrity culture. How does the media use famous people in advertising?
In a lot of ways, because
if people follows one person, for example, Justin Bieber right now in the Super Bowl, the media will use it and publicists will use him as long as it takes, because if he's famous, the money return will be really high.
Do you think people want to buy a product because the celebrity endorses that?
It depends of the target, but if it's a smart target, it won't be happen like this. But if it's like a child or teenagers, they will follow anything if their leaders does it.
You mentioned Justin Bieber. Are there any negative effects of young people becoming famous?
Maybe not for the people that follows the famous people, but I think that it will be really bad for that poor guy. It's being famous at that young age, you don't know what is good and what is bad, and they will always turn bad.
Thank you very much. This is the end of the speaking test.
Okay, that was Alexandria. So let's see what the examiner comments were for her. Now, in terms of her fluency and coherence, she gives extended and appropriate answers. So she's really quite fluent. She uses a good range of markers and linkers. So we hear phrases and words such as first, actually, I think so, for example, in a lot of ways. Now, she does hesitate at times, but that's not because she's searching for language to express her ideas. Instead, she pauses and she hesitates when she's trying to make her ideas clearer. Now, lexical resource was Alexandra's main strength. She uses a wide range of language, and we heard some lovely, less common idiomatic and colloquial language. So some beautiful phrases there, such as lose your privacy, selling their soul to the devil, getting dumped. She does make some mistakes, however, with some inappropriate word use. So we heard like a small news and at the end of the relaxed evening instead of end of the relaxing evening. But again, those mistakes were minor and we still understood what she was trying to say. Alexandra's grammatical range is good in both simple and complex structures, and she uses them flexibly. Some of her sentences are error-free, but however, she does make a number of mistakes with articles, mistakes with prepositions, subject-verb agreement, and verb tenses. So she said, if someone recognize you instead of if someone recognizes you, if people follows instead of if people follow, you will take them fail instead of you will make them fail, and it won't be happen like this instead of it won't happen like this. So still quite a few errors are allowed to be made and you can still achieve a band 7. But again, your error-free sentences, there must be more error-free sentences than there are mistakes. But again, her complexity, she used both simple and complex structures very flexibly. In regards to her pronunciation, she does have an accent, but her pronunciation is generally clear and easy to follow. She uses stress and intonation well to emphasize meaning. So you don't have to pay for a lot of stuff. They will give free dresses and free stays in the hotels. So there was some good sentence stress there as well. She does have some problems with sounds. That's quite typical with Spanish speakers who confuse the y sound for the j sound. So she said jung instead of young, but we could still understand what she was saying. Now let's take a look at a band 8. Again, still part 3 of the speaking test, but this candidate achieved a band 8.
Now, we've been talking about a well-known person who you like or admire, and I'd like to discuss with you one or two more general questions related to this. Let's consider, first of all, being in the public eye. Famous people are watched by everybody. What are the
Yes.
advantages and disadvantages of that?
Okay, the advantages is that a lot of people watching you, so you become famous, and there are a lot of things which you can do correctly and politically right, because there is media watching you, and you can go ahead and pass the message to the media in a right way. The disadvantage is that you have to be diplomatically correct. At times, if there are certain things which are incorrect, still you have to go ahead and do that, which doesn't make sense, because there are a lot of political leaders, they are into corruption back in India, and at times, yeah, there are some things which are wrong, but they have to do it.
Why do they have to do it?
Because there's a lot of political pressure, and if they don't do it, the political party would not support them, and in the end, they have to resign.
Do you think the media plays a role in that? What is the media's approach to reporting what famous people do?
Well, media plays an important role. At times, media will actually show things which are not correct, or if you see it, it looks like, yeah, he's wrong, but that's not the case. So media plays a very important role. They portray in a wrong manner at times, and sometimes they do portray in a right manner.
Can anything be done about that, do you think?
Not really, because in today's world, what has happened is everything is communicated by media, television, news, internet. So you just have to go ahead and probably call the media and do a meeting and answer questions to the public and give justification and reasons.
Very often the media reports on the most trivial things in important issues, but people are fascinated by those things. Why are people fascinated by it?
Because these days people like to listen to gossip and trivial things. They're not interested in the bigger part, what's happening. They have a simple life. They would like to live it their way. They are not bothered what is happening within the country. There are only few people you see are really interested in knowing about the country and getting all the information and reacting.
Let's go on and talk about this celebrity culture. How are famous people used by advertisers nowadays?
Famous people are really used for advertising because, one, they can promote the product, and two, there are a lot of fans. They're fans. So obviously, if they are using that product, what will happen is those fans will actually use that product. And of course, it's a money-making business. I mean, if Mahatma Gandhi wore a watch of Swatch, I would wear it. Yeah, I would wear it. I was like, oh, he wore it, I'll wear it.
The use of famous people in advertising and other things, do you think that has a negative effect, especially on young people?
At times, yes. There are some of the advertisements which are not meant or not, they are offensive to younger generations. So at times, yes.
Do you think that famous people can influence public opinion beyond just selling things? They can make people vote differently or believe?
Yes, they can. They influence a lot of people today. Even cricketers or any kind of famous personality, they influence the public, to do things.
How do you feel about that?
I'm fine with that as long as, at times I do like, but then at times I don't like, so I don't bother much.
All right. Well, thanks, Kush. That's the end of the speaking test.
Thank you.
Okay, so that was Kush, our Band 8 example. And let's see what the examiner had to say about Kush. Now, the reason why she achieved a Band 8 is because her performance is consistently high across all of the criteria. So in terms of fluency and coherence, Kush speaks fluently. She gives quite long and detailed responses without losing any coherence. Sometimes she hesitates, but this is usually only related to the actual content of what she's saying, and only occasionally to search for language. She uses fillers such as "you know" or "I mean" to cover up her hesitation. So it's always good to fill in those gaps with language rather than silence or simply saying when you're not sure about what to say. She also uses linking words and markers very naturally. So we heard some beautiful phrases such as "that's not the case" and "I'm fine with that." In regards to her lexical resource, it's very wide and it allows her to talk about a range of topics. And she can talk about those topics very flexibly and precisely, with giving many examples of an excellent range of vocabulary. So we heard political pressure, into corruption, today's world, promote the product, a money-making business. So again, her collocation and her word choice is very good. Only very occasionally does she make any mistakes. So she says, "do a meeting," or "in a right manner," or "in a wrong manner." And in regards to Kush's grammar, she uses a wide range of grammatical structures with a high degree of accuracy. She makes only minor errors and only occasionally. Kush uses pronunciation well to reinforce meaning with rhythm, stress, and intonation. She used all of those things very well. Only occasionally were there problems with word stress, and she did have some problems with the TH, the th sound, but again, very, very minor, and she was very, very easy to understand. So I hope that those 3 examples give you an idea of what skills are needed to achieve those higher band scores, because you saw a clear example of a band 6 and then a band 7 and a band 8. So just to recap on what I said in regards to the speaking test, in your preparation, you should be doing as much as you can in English before the test. So not only speaking it, but listening it and reading English. That will help with your vocabulary and also with your grammar structures. During the speaking test, it's natural to be nervous. And you might, well, I know for me, myself, when I'm nervous, I speak very quickly. So try to talk at a steady rate, not too slow or not too fast. Now, remember, in part 1 of the test, you'll be talking about your likes and your dislikes. But the first questions the examiners will ask you are usually about where you live or what you do. Now, it's really good to practice what you can say about where you live or what you do, but please avoid memorizing answers. You won't sound natural and you won't get marks for language which has obviously been memorized. Now, in part 2, you're given 1 minute preparation time to prepare what you're going to talk about for 2 minutes on the topic that you've been given. So write down key words that you can use for each of the points on the task card you are given. There are 4 bullet points. So this helps you to structure your 2-minute talk, and use the key vocabulary in your notes to develop each point. The 4th bullet point always asks you to explain something, and this is often the bullet point which gives you most to talk about. So use that 1 minute time. Now, if any time the examiner asks you a question and you're not sure of what to say, instead of just remaining silent or stammering and going, as you think about what to say, use language to fill in those gaps. So the examiner might ask you a question, you need a couple of seconds to think about it, so you can actually say, "Now let me think about that for a moment." Or you could say something like, "Gee, that's a good question. I haven't thought about that before. Just give me a second." And please avoid phrases such as how do you say or how to say. Remember that pronunciation is important. It accounts for 25% of your speaking mark. So don't sound flat, okay? Use stress and intonation to make your meaning clear. Now, if we refer back to Alexandra's performance, she did make a few mistakes, but she didn't allow that to stop her and she kept going. So if you realize that you've made a mistake and you can correct yourself, then please do so, because this shows the examiner that you know the right answers to say. But if you realize you made a mistake a while ago, don't worry about it. Just keep going. As I said to you earlier on in the presentation, the examiner is going to ask you why. Particularly in part 1, you'll get asked that a lot when you're talking about your likes and your dislikes. So be prepared to give more details about each of the points that you make, okay? And again, in part 3, you might be asked to explain your answers by giving reasons for what you say. So try to weigh up both sides of the question and give examples to support the points that you make. Again, it's good to rehearse about if you work or study, or rehearse where you live, but please don't memorize the answers and try to sound natural. When you're giving your opinion, some really good phrases to introduce your opinion are, in my view, as far as I'm concerned, generally speaking, I'd say. These are wonderful phrases to introduce when you're giving to introduce your point of view. Now, please don't worry about what topic you'll be given in part 2. They cover a wide range of subject matters. You could be asked to talk about education, health, travel, transport, your favorite movie, someone in your family or a friend. All of the IELTS tests material are trialed extensively before they go live. So this is to make sure that nobody is disadvantaged from whatever background they come from. So in all of my 18 years of experience, I've never encountered a candidate who couldn't talk about their topic in part 2. So just relax about that. And remember, you're given that 1 minute of thinking time to talk about it. Okay, so just to reiterate, please make the most of every opportunity to use English. Be realistic and set targets for your preparation. If you've planned your test for a month in advance, you might want to spend 1 week working on each module. And make sure you research which module is best suited for you. Is it the academic or the general training module? I've also talked to you about how you'll be scored. You can find those public band descriptors on the IELTSessentials.com website, so you can familiarise yourself with those. And remember what I said about IELTS preparation courses. These focus more on test-taking skills than they do on language skills. So if you've done an IELTS preparation course, taken the test and only received a band 6, chances are you doing another IELTS preparation course won't be in your best interest. You might need to do some English language training. So to achieve an IELTS band 7, it actually represents thousands of hours of learning. So take a long-term approach. Anything that you do in English is going to help you. So push yourself as much as you possibly can, all the time. I feel like I don't need to tell you that. You already know this stuff. Now, this is a good slide to take a screenshot of. It gives you some resources to follow up with after the webinar. There's the IELTS.com as well as the IELTS Essentials website. There's a Facebook page, and there's a wealth of material also on YouTube. So you can join our free IELTS talks. with our IELTS experts there and have your questions answered. So speaking of questions, I think we've reached question part of our presentation this evening. So let me just pop my camera on.
Thank you, Teena. We've had quite a few questions come through on Facebook and Zoom, so I'll start reading some of them out for you.
Okay.
Starting off, someone's asked, using informal words such as gonna or wanna, will that affect my score?
Well, it is a typically informal style, and it is slang. Remember that it's not a formal test per se, but these will affect your pronunciation scores because you're not pronouncing the words correctly. So just be mindful of that you might not achieve as high a score as you would think by using those slang words.
Thank you. Now, another question has come in. Will my speaking examiner ever end the speaking test early if I'm unable to keep talking?
Yes, that usually happens with particularly low-level candidates. And but the examiners are required to try to get as much language out of the candidate as they can. But it usually only happens with lower level candidates. And I'm talking like a band 2 or a band 3, where the examiner cannot get them to speak very much. But the examiner will try, and it's their job to try as hard as they can to get language out of the candidate. So it's very rare that the test will be ended under 11 minutes. The test is scheduled to run between 11 to 14 minutes, depending on how much the candidate can talk about. But it's very rare for a test to be ended under 11 minutes.
Thank you. Now, someone's asked, how important is eye contact during the IELTS speaking test?
Well, again, if you think about in real life, when you're talking to someone, we do maintain eye contact. So I'd like to hope that the examiner is looking at you and encouraging you and smiling at you and nodding their head as they're listening. So it would be quite normal for you to be looking at the examiner when appropriate.
Thank you. Okay, now just reading some questions here. Someone's asked, if I make a grammatical error that I'm aware of and then correct myself, will that affect my score?
Well, it's great if you're able to do that because you've heard yourself make a mistake, so you correct yourself. So that shows the examiner that you know the right thing to say. So that actually works in your favour. And even native speakers of English make grammatical mistakes and have to correct themselves at times. So it works, definitely works in your favour if you can do this.
That's good to know. Okay, someone's asked quite a long question here. Is it better to keep talking to fill all of my 2 minutes in part 2, even if I don't know what to say, or should I just stop talking after 1 minute when I have finished all my ideas?
I think it would be in your best interest to try and keep talking for 2 minutes because that's the time limit the examiners are required, or the examiners require you to speak for 2 minutes. So it's not up to you to decide when you stop. It's actually the examiner's decision. So the examiner will keep their eye on the time. You don't have to worry about the timing. And the examiner, usually when you've filled that 2 minutes, the examiner will say thank you. And that indicates when you've spoken for 2 minutes. But yes, please do your best to speak to 2 minutes. If you decide you finished at 1 minute, the examiner again will prompt you to encourage you to keep speaking.
Thank you. Okay, someone's asked, in part 3, my English teacher has told me that I can't use personal words such as in my opinion or personal example. Is she right?
No, I'm sorry to say that your teacher is not right. Because again, these are usual phrases that we would use when we're introducing our opinions. So that's fine to use phrases like that.
Okay. Alrighty, someone's asked, is there a choice or an option where I can ask my examiner for another topic?
Usually the examiners select the topic before the candidate enters the room. So I doubt that the examiner will change the topic. That has never happened in my experience. I haven't heard examiners talk about changing topics for candidates. But again, as I stressed before, the topics really are wide-ranging in their subject matter and very, very general. So I doubt that you would get something that you couldn't talk about.
Thank you. Okay, this is an interesting question. Someone's asked, what happens if I swear in the IELTS speaking test?
Well, again, it depends on the context and how it happens, because again, in general conversation, I wouldn't use serious swear words. I wouldn't drop the F-bomb, for example. That would be completely inappropriate. But sometimes, you know, swear words just crop up. And again, the examiner will get a sense or a feeling about, again, it depends on your level of English, and it all depends on what you're talking about, and the context is very important as well. So I can't give a definitive yes or a no answer to that, because sometimes if you're talking about what somebody else has said, you know, you might be quoting somebody else. So, you know, it might be appropriate to use a minor swear word. Like I said, no F-bombs, please.
Okay, quite a few people have asked, you know, and this is a question we get a lot, what happens if I can't think of anything to say on the topic? What do you recommend?
Well, I recommend, so for example, if they've given you the topic to talk about your favorite book, for example, and you don't read, you hate reading, you don't like reading at all, don't panic. When the examiner says, can you start speaking now, please, you can say, look, I've been given this topic to talk about my favorite book, but I actually hate reading. My sister loves reading, but I hate it. But I do love watching movies. So I'd like to tell you about my favorite movie. Remember, the speaking test is a test about communication. It's not a test about your knowledge. So if you're able to tell the examiner why you can't talk about it, but you can talk about something else instead, that will work in your favor. You won't be penalized for talking off the topic, and you won't be penalized if you don't talk about all those 4 bullet points. That doesn't matter.
Okay. Now someone's asked, can you define the difference between rhythm in speaking and intonation?
Oh gosh, this is taking me back to my teaching days. The rhythm is basically when you're listening to my voice and you can hear that I'm generally speaking and putting word stress on some words, appropriate words like photograph or photographer, you can hear that there's different rhythm and word stress in those words. And intonation is the pitch of our voice. So if I'm asking you a question, usually my voice, depending on the question I'm asking, my voice might rise at the end of the sentence, or it might go down at the end of the sentence. That's the intonation. So they're very, very similar, but slightly different.
Okay, someone has said, do I need to adopt a certain accent when I'm speaking English in IELTS?
Please don't use any or do anything that doesn't come naturally to you. If you naturally have more of an American accent in your English, just speak naturally, because again, I want to encourage you to be as relaxed as possible during the test, because when you're relaxed, that's when you'll produce your best language. If you're trying to concentrate on putting on a different type of accent, you're going to be using a lot of energy to maintain that accent. So please just smile, try to relax yourself, take deep breaths before you, just as you go into the testing room and sit down with the examiner, just take some deep breaths, relax, and just be yourself.
That's a great tip. You're in the hot seat tonight, Teena. We've got a few more questions and then we'll
Sure.
wrap up. So someone's asked, how much does speed affect my results? Should I speak slower, faster?
Again, just whatever comes naturally to you, but be mindful that, you know, your nerves will be up on the day. So I know for myself personally, my tendency is to speed up when I'm nervous, I start to speak really quickly just because I want to, just start talking, and I'm so anxious to keep talking that I'll just go quicker and quicker and quicker. Try not to do that. Again, you just want to be relaxed and just try and speak at a steady rate. Okay, again, but don't go too slowly either, because that doesn't work in your favor as well. Just try and be as normal as you can under the circumstances.
Speaking of feeling comfortable in the test room, someone said, is my clothing important?
Oh, we've had that question before, Gemma. I would say, look, it's a big testing day for you, because usually you'll have done your listening, reading and writing before you do your speaking test. So it's a long day for you. So just dress comfortably. The examiner is not assessing you on what clothes you're wearing. They don't even pay attention to that. So just dress to be as comfortable as you need to be on the day, because it is a long and stressful day for you.
Thank you, Teena. Well, that was some fantastic questions, and sorry if we didn't get round to answering your question in tonight's session, but we will answer as many possible on Facebook. I'll just leave it with a comment that we received on Facebook, Teena. Someone's written, I'm an English teacher here in Greece, but born in Melbourne. I am Greek, however, I'm a native speaker and use the English language both at work and at home. I'm grateful to be given the opportunity to attend such an informative webinar. Congratulations.
Oh, thank you very much.
Thank you for
very
that feedback.
kind. Yes.
So a few other people have asked if they can watch this webinar again, and the answer is yes. It will be saved on our IELTS Essentials Facebook page under videos. Teena also referred to the speaking criteria, the band score descriptions during the webinar. They can also be found on IELTS Essentials or IELTS.com and in IELTS Support Tools download. So please check out the website for that. What else do I have to say? Now, if you're not following us on Facebook, please do. You can also stay up to date with us on Instagram. Our handle is IELTS.essentials. And please follow us on TikTok as well. We have a lot of fun there. So as Teena mentioned, please join us for our next webinar, which is November the 5th, the same time, which is 5 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time. And we'll be joined by an IELTS test taker who's going to tell us all about how he learned English, and he's going to share his tips and tricks for studying for IELTS. So that is November the 5th. So thanks everyone for joining tonight, and thank you, Teena, so much for that. That was fantastic.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Lovely. Thanks everyone. See you next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye.